Really quickly, everybody, before we jump into this podcast, the Back Pain Back to Exercise group program is kicking off this Monday. There's still spaces available. We are going to dive deep into the subjects that we talk about in this podcast with movement, but also look at the emotional side of injury. This is something I deal with every single day, and I'm really excited to kick off the program and excited to meet everyone who's already signed up. So hit the link in the bio if you are interested in jumping on board. As I said, spaces are limited for this program. It's a 10-week block, and we are going to go into detail on what the root cause of pain is, what the root cause of your issues are, how to fix them, and then we will guide you along that path. I'm really excited to get it going, but for now, let's jump into the podcast. What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. And this episode of the podcast is going to be a deep dive. It's an interesting one. It's one that I've been journaling on actually during the week. It's on movement and how movement helps and how specifically we can use movement to fix a chronic injury. And we're looking at the lower, kind of the deeper levels of it. It's a podcast that honestly, you may need to listen to this one twice to get an understanding of it and to get a better grip of it. But I am going to put the keys in there to fixing the issue that you're dealing with. So if you can listen to it, if you can take those keys and you can apply them, the principles, and hopefully now I'll be able to, because this is like what I'm going to be talking about here is a lot of years of work and understanding and kind of getting a deeper dive into how to fix them and how to rehab a chronic injury. But I can imagine that for those of you who are dealing with this for the first time, it might be a bit of a challenge, but then again, you might just be able to click into it straight away and it could be 100%. For the physios who are listening to this, I feel that you're probably going to have a better understanding of it, and I would love if you could take this, especially reach out to me on Instagram and we chat about it in more detail, but take it and apply it and see how it works for you when you're dealing with these chronic issues, and then see what you would take from it, what you would work in or what you'd improve on, and then let me know. I'm always looking to improve it. It's a really interesting cycle. It's one that I have worked on myself for a long time with clients, and how the idea behind why we use movement in a lot of cases, and especially with learning and unlearning and relearning with the nervous system. So to jump into it, okay, movement helps. All right, simple as when you're dealing with a chronic injury, like a back pain, like a chronic knee pain, a chronic shoulder, a chronic hip, there's more to it than just the physical aspect. And I think we know that. Now, movement is going to unlock more movement. So it's a really simple one. If you want to improve your mobility, you have to lean into it. You have to kind of work into those positions that you're not comfortable in. And then with time, it will start to improve and you're going to have better mobility, better range that you can work with. Okay. But the other side of that is too much movement anchored from one specific point in a really short time. It may cause issues. And the point there is in a short time. Okay. A really simple one is like if you're, an ankle sprain, if you're running and then you cut really sharply and the ATFL ligament is overstretched really fast, there's a chance that it tears. Okay, really simple one. That's a short time. Now the same thing goes for, let's say, when I was doing jiu-jitsu during the year, I got 2 bulging discs in my neck, and the reason that I look at it for is because I didn't love it, but I didn't mind a collar tie. I didn't mind when someone had a hand on my neck and was pulling it down, because I felt that while they were focused on that, I was able to get into other positions. And in general, my neck was pretty strong because of boxing in years before that. So it didn't bother me too much until I started to notice that, okay, I'm anchoring off of one point here too much, and I can actually start to feel it a bit more. And then it started to flare up a lot more because of that. And then I got the MRIs and you could see it. And I was laughing looking at the MRI because I was like, it's funny, it's exactly where I would have felt it all of the time. And because I was putting too much pressure, I was anchoring from one point in too short a time. So if you change that perspective though, and if you look at with time, we can get adaptation with movement and anchoring off one point, but we just need to have the recovery right. Then it changes it. That's why we do strength training. That's why we do running. And that's why when you injure yourself, we go into a rehab phase, because within that phase, then we can start to build on it again. Okay. And we can improve it. Now, when you're looking at chronic injury, a lot of times a chronic injury is one that flares up for 3 to 6 to 9 months or multiple times over multiple years, where it keeps coming back, persistent pain or persistent injury. Movement has actually become a fear. And this is fueled by the injury and the recurring injury, but then also the narrative that we have after. Because if your beliefs are aligned to an injury developing into a bigger one, bigger problem, it's more than likely that you will start to move in relation to that. So if someone tells you, okay, don't bend your back because it's bad for your back, and you don't bend your back, and then one day you drop a pen, you bend down, you pick it up, and you get this massive flare up, is that because, well, let's look at it two ways. You're probably deconditioned because you haven't bent down that much, but it's also because you've been telling yourself you can't bend your back. So your body, as soon as you go into that position, the nervous system says, haven't been here in a while. And then as a result, it blows up because it's like, okay, let's be safe. We haven't been in this position. Let's relax and make sure everything is okay. And it gives you a lot of pain and a lot of injury, or not a lot of injury, a lot of tightness, because that's how it adapts to it, or that's its protective mechanism. So that's how the narrative that we have can fuel the issue that we deal with. Now, and that's what I was talking about. If your beliefs are aligned with it, it's going to be a bigger problem. I was recently chatting to a lady her who had bulging discs in her back, and she told me that her lawyer, which is crazy because it's like your lawyer, it's not it's not like you're a medical professional, it's just a lawyer. It's someone actually that you hold in high regard, more so if I was looking at a position of power. Her lawyer told her that her discs in her back, they crumbled. And I was like, they crumbled? I've never even heard anyone describe it like that before. How could they crumble? Because they're a jelly-like substance. So it'd be very difficult for them to crumble. But I didn't say that. But it just got me thinking about, okay, the narrative this person has because of what somebody told her. And now they're going to, she asked me then, do your exercises wear it down, or what do they do for it? And I was like, it's going to be, I can talk to you, or I can talk to this person all I want now about movement, but until I get to the bottom point of the fact that the disc doesn't crumble, that was something that she was told, and that she maybe misunderstood, or the person who told her that was not as educated on what was going on. The discs don't crumble, so it doesn't, as I was saying, they're a jelly-like substance. I have to go into a very deep place there with her, which is going to take a while to get an understanding of, change deeper beliefs. The fact that she said, do your exercises wear it down? Well, exercise actually builds it up. It improves it. It strengthens it if you give it enough recovery time. But see, that's the part that they're missing out on a lot of times, is that they miss the recovery side of things. People say, okay, that breaks your body down. But then why do we exercise? That's the thing. Like, what's the reason for it? It's when you look at things that are done in too short a time, there's a bigger issue. Now, I don't want to go off the point, but yeah, I just thought it was a funny one, how she phrased it based on what she had heard before. So in that case, the beliefs have become the outcome. So she's going to tell other people that, like she wrote, that was to me on Facebook actually, is what she wrote to me on. So she's going to tell everyone else that, and then slowly but surely people who are less knowledgeable about the subject will believe her, because that will become a story in the back of their mind. And then if they do deal with an injury in future, that can be a story that crops up, which is a difficult one to manage. And I've come across it nearly every single day with people at chronic injuries, that they have certain beliefs that are in the body that just aren't true, that are not aligned with what actually happens in the body. So when it comes to it, many of the clients that I work with are able to tell me the narrative that crops up when they get a flare-up, or if they move in ways that they haven't before. And a lot of the times it's they start telling themselves, you need to be careful, you don't want to injure yourself again, you've done it again if it flares up, or you shouldn't do that because your doctor told you not to. So there's like these little narratives that run in the background when they start to move into a certain position. You need to be careful there. Oh, what's that? Is that bad? Is that good? Like where they can feel it. Is that a dart of pain? What am I feeling there? And they just continue to lean into it and continue to tell themselves or believe narratives that they've been given and that just come out, and they're probably subconscious at this stage, that actually are not in line with their recovery. So once you understand that the pain can be a compass to recovery, we need to start fixing that narrative. So if you know that I can use a bit of this pain to help me understand how far I can go right now, and I will find over time that pain will reduce and I can improve it, and there's other factors involved in it, then you start to use that as your compass to point you in the right direction. And when you do understand that, you're able to fix the narrative of what's going on in the background. Not that the body's always breaking down. Too much movement in too short a time, too much pressure, too much intensity, or too much volume, there's a chance of injury. But movement that is integrated into your lifestyle, over time you'll find that it's not as much of a problem. The body will recover, it will adapt, and it will get stronger. So This is where we go into the deep dive here for a second now. That's the background. So we use a movement. By voluntarily using movement, we can assess and test both the pain and the narrative in a controlled environment. And we can also test the reactions in real time. So we can test what somebody does and how they react by using this movement. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Now, if you start to take this proactive approach to the reaction, so now you go into a position, let's say it's a forward bend, okay, and you flex forward, you try to touch your toes. When you go into that position, you will notice that there's certain reactions that you have based off of beliefs that you've had in the past. Now, this is different level. This is grassroots level, what I'm talking about right now, where somebody has gotten to such a bad stage that they can't bend over and touch their toes. But other people, it could be deadlifting. It could be, once I go over 100 kilo on the deadlift, this is one that I've heard often, once I go over 100 kilo on the deadlift, I start to get issues or injuries. So then you need to look at, okay, well, what else is going on there? Is it the narrative? Is it the volume intensity? Do they build up the 100 kilo too fast? Are they doing it when they are fatigued? Are they doing it when they're ready to go? Are they putting too much pressure on themselves to get it? There's a lot more to it. But when you start taking this proactive approach to the reactions, we use it to our advantage. Because then you can start to know where you need to look. And considering the reaction plays a role in the cycle of pain, it becomes one of our first points of intervention after we get an initial pain. So it's, okay, you bend over, you get a dart of pain, what do you do next? The person can say to you, I get into that position, I got a dart of pain. Then it's like, all right, well, what's your next step? Do you get out of that movement and you avoid it completely, and then you really over catastrophize it in your mind with how bad it was and you never want to go in there again? Or do you understand, okay, that was a dart, am I able to ease back into it and see how it works and see how it improves? Now you try it a second time, and oftentimes there's a different reaction the second time because the issue was only there. It was more of a reactive, it was more of a protective reaction of the nervous system. And you move back in and the dart isn't there anymore. So if you didn't do that, you wouldn't have noticed the second time. If you had just taken it as off the first bat, your reaction was to avoid it completely, then it becomes a problem because you're falling at the first hurdle. Okay, so that's why we need to consider the reaction and consider how the reaction plays a role in the greater cycle of the chronic pain and the person who's dealing with chronic pain. And as I said, we can use it as our first point of intervention after the initial pain. So if you can tell them, reassure them and say it's actually okay, or reassure yourself and say that that's okay, I actually have control of that pain, I'm going to just touch off it again and see if I can move around and see really where the issue is, then you have a better understanding of what's going on and you can fix it. Once you understand it, it's easier to fix it. But if you don't understand it, it's very difficult to fix it. The other side to that is if you're dealing with a chronic issue that's become oversensitized to pain and extremely reactive to any stimulus at all. That's why I was talking about where you go into that position, you get a dart. I remember I had a lady recently who had this severe shoulder issue, and when she went to put her hand behind her head, she got this really, really bad dart, and she waited until our call the next week instead of texting me or instead of telling me to do anything, and she waited for the call for the next week. And I was like, okay, jumped on the call, any issue? She said, yeah, I did this and I avoided it since. And I was like, that was 7 days ago that happened to you. So I said, okay, let's do it on the call. We went through it. I got her to put her hand behind her head, big dart of pain. She was like, oh Jesus, there it is again, I can't believe it, I'm after doing it. Verbally, she vocally went through the whole narrative of how bad it was. And I was like, okay, that's all right, let's move around, shake it out a small bit, and let's try it again. And she went back. She was very hesitant, went back, and she was like, actually, no, it was okay that time. And then I said, okay, by the end of this call, we want to do maybe 4 or 5 of them. So we're going to keep doing it. Act as you're combing your hair, just go in and out of that position. It's funny, I'm actually doing it at the time here, when I'm talking about it. And she noticed that it was gone, okay? It hadn't been there at all anymore. So what it was an oversensitized system that had reacted to the stimulus of going into that position the first time, and then the reaction was to stop doing everything for 7 days after and wait till she jumped on the call. So I was like, we need to fix this. This is something we need to work on, because this is positive. Like, we've picked out something that's contributing to your issue. We can see that if we work into it a little bit more with a little bit more movement, then we can fix it. And with time, then she was able to overcome that issue and slowly but surely started to improve. Now, there's still other narratives there and beliefs that we're still working on and we're still trying to break, especially with she's still living in fear of this kind of flare up happening again, which is so common. So we need to break that. And there's other ways of breaking that. Will I talk about? Yeah, I will. There's other ways of breaking that. Sometimes you actually need to cause that flare up to happen again to show them that they have control of the flare up. That's a simple one, just for people who are listening. Sometimes you need the flare up to control the flare up, because then it becomes less of a fear, because you understand, all right, well, it actually wasn't that bad this time, so let's see how it works. Now, to get back onto it, if we're dealing with a chronic issue that has become oversensitized to pain and extremely reactive to stimulus, you need to control and improve the reaction, but you need to create a smaller circle for feedback and a smaller circle for adaptation. This is what I was talking about, where you're looking to get into the deeper levels of it. When you use this principle of creating smaller circles, it's Josh Waitzkin actually is The Art of Learning. It's a very, very interesting book, very short, but he goes into detail on how you can speed up your learning phases. And one of them is creating shorter feedback circles, so you understand, okay, once I come around, I get the pain, so what can I do and what can I change in that situation? So if we can create a smaller circle, we can accelerate the learning and the relearning of the nervous system. That's the aim, is we aim to accelerate the learning and relearning of the nervous system to a more optimal strategy. And the more optimal strategy is less pain with less protection. So we know that, okay, if I go past 90 degrees of flexion, I'm getting more pain. So let's work into 85, or let's work into that position a little bit more and just see how we're feeling. Okay, and see if we're able to do anything around that position to improve it. And when we look at the feedback circles and we look at what we can change within the feedback circles and what we can fine tune, there's so many factors. And this is why it's important to work with a professional, because they will be able to tell you the different factors. Within the feedback circle, you have your breathing reaction. I'm just going to name a few. You have your thoughts. You have the anticipation of what's going to happen. You have the fear. You have the tensing, where you really tighten up. And then you have, outside of that, your reactions of, like, do you go back into it or do you go out of it and avoid it? Do you go in at a low pace, or do you, like a fast pace, or do you go in at a slow pace? Do you do it multiple times? Do you add weight to it? Can you work on the eccentric? Can you work on an isometric within that thing? And how does that work? If you go into the position, does it hurt going into it? But if you hold the position, does it feel okay? And if you come out of the position, how does it feel? So this is where the fine tuning happens. And once you've created a small feedback circle of, I'm the position I'm working on, I'm talking about bending down, touching your toes. For the lady, it could have been working behind her head. Then we can start to improve them. So the next time you go into that position, let's look at focusing on relaxing your breathing, turning it down, making sure it's nice and calm. And then after that, we can see how it goes. So we do that, do a couple of reps of it, see if we can calm it down. Lovely. Did it work? Yes. Did it not? Or did it work? Yes. Not as much as I'd liked. Okay, well, we'll try something else then. What were you thinking about when you go into that situation? What are you thinking about after you go into that situation? Do you feel, this is an interesting one, do you feel like you were lucky after that situation to not have caused a flare-up? Or have you come to the understanding that a flare-up, that there's so many other factors to it, and it's not as much about luck as it is about how we react and how our body is and how sensitive we are? Do you tense up and hold it in anticipation of pain? Are you holding that position? And if you feel if you get out of that position, does it give you more pain? Where you're walking around in this completely tensed position all of the time. I'm walking around here now, I'm holding my shoulders up really tight and shoulders back. Maybe I should start doing videos of these podcasts. It might be easier to do, because I'm always holding the positions and acting out the positions. So if you are tensing up and you are really tight, well, what's the opposite that we can do of that? Really simple feedback circle you can use for this one is, if you find yourself up and tight, is look and try to go dancing, where you're dancing to a movement and you're just moving your shoulders like a salsa dancer, or you're just moving the body nice and relaxed. How does that feel? If you start to go into that, does it feel a lot more fluid, as opposed to, and you can do it a lot slower, as opposed to if you try to jerk it into another position, which is probably what most people do. Oh, my shoulders are really tight, jerk it down, and then, oh, that's sore, and they come back up into this tight position again. So we need to start bringing a bit more conscious adaptation to the reactions of what we're doing when we're dealing with a chronic injury. If we can create those smaller feedback circles where we go into a flex position, or where we go with the hand behind the head, and we assess the little factors within that point, then we can work on improving those little factors and build on it over time. Now, it could be that, as also like we were looking at the strength side of things, that could be your main focus. Everyone has their own thing that they like to do, but you need to try create these circles, these little feedback circles for yourself and for others to really hone in on fixing a chronic injury. And that's what I have found has worked with my clients for getting them out of pain, and especially when they're dealing with pain for years at a time, getting them and changing that identity around, okay, I'm someone with back pain or someone with a back issue, and now it's actually, no, I'm an athlete, I'm an active person. But that's all I'm going to talk about today. And really quickly, the Back Pain Back to Exercise group program is finally going to be kicking off this Monday for those of you who are dealing with back pain, who are dealing with back issues, and are looking to get either back into exercise or build on the exercise routine that you have right now. If you're someone who you feel that January has kind of gotten away from you, this is the perfect time to jump in. It's a 10-week course, and we're really going to dive in deep into what I'm talking about here, about creating smaller circles, addressing the emotional aspect, working on mobility and movement, working on building up an exercise routine, whether that be running or you want to be in the gym, whatever works for you. We're looking at building it up. We're going to do a Zoom call every second week, a live Zoom, and we are also going to do a live or a Q&A where we pop it in and we go through those in a lot more detail. And I'm going to focus on a specific topic every second week also. You can add questions to the community. You can ask people. I will also be in there answering questions as we go through it. You have full access to the course forevermore. So hit the link in the bio. Check it out. As I said, spaces are limited. If this sounds like it's for you, if you feel like you want to get back into exercise, or you want to rebuild the active lifestyle, or you want to really get to the root cause of what's causing you pain and why you keep getting flare-ups. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that this is something that I do every day. I love it. To help guide you along a path to fixing the issues and injuries that you're dealing with. So check that out. It's going to be starting on Monday the 22nd. So whenever that is, tomorrow or 2 days, whenever this podcast comes out. Yeah, looking forward to it, guys and girls. And I will see you all again and chat to you all again next week. Let me know what you thought of that episode. Let me know if you have any thoughts. But that's all from me. Chat to you all again soon. Have a good one.